The last push? Inside claims UPND used the constitution to secure power. What if winning elections is no longer just about votes, but about rewriting the rules before the race ends? A hard-hitting KBN TV editorial argues that Zambia has entered a dangerous phase, where citizens are gradually subdued, constitutional changes are normalized, and elections become the final step, not the deciding one. Are these claims exaggerated political rhetoric or a serious warning about democratic backsliding? Tonight, we dissect the last push line by line so you can decide what is fact, what is interpretation, and what this debate means for Zambia's democracy. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. It's been quite an eventful week here in Southern Africa, and today, we're diving into a story that has sent shockwaves through Zambian politics and raised questions that go far beyond its borders. Our lead story tonight. Claims emerged that Zambia's ruling UPND may have strategically weaponized constitutional provisions to cement their grip on power. Picture this: a government that swept into office on the promise of democratic renewal, of transparency, of breaking away from the authoritarian shadows of the past. Now imagine whispers, growing louder by the day, that this same government has found a way to manipulate the very foundations of the Constitution to ensure they remain in power. Not through violence. Not through military coups. But through something far more subtle, far more insidious: the strategic use of legal loopholes and constitutional amendments. Was this a calculated plan from the very beginning? Did the United Party for National Development enter State House already knowing exactly which legal buttons to press? How does a party transform from opposition crusaders into alleged constitutional engineers? And if these claims hold any truth, what does it mean for the fragility of democracy not just in Zambia, but across the continent? Could this become the blueprint for future governments seeking permanent power while maintaining the illusion of democratic legitimacy? And perhaps most disturbing of all, if the Constitution itself can be turned into a weapon against the people it was designed to protect, where does that leave citizens seeking accountability? Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light in early 2024, when opposition leaders and constitutional scholars began raising red flags about a series of legislative maneuvers that had been quietly building momentum since the UPND's landslide victory in August 2021. To understand this fully, we need to rewind. August 12, 2021, Hakainde Hichilema, after 6 failed attempts, finally captures the presidency with over 2.8 million votes. A staggering 59% of the vote share. The victory was celebrated not just in Zambia, but across Africa as a triumph of democracy. The Patriotic Front's Edgar Lungu conceded defeat, and for the first time in years, there was genuine hope that Zambia was entering a new democratic era. But according to critics, the groundwork for constitutional manipulation began almost immediately. By October 2021, just 2 months after taking office, the UPND government initiated what they called constitutional alignment processes, technical language for reviewing and amending laws to bring them in line with the 2016 Constitution. On the surface, this seemed reasonable, even necessary. But opposition members of parliament began noticing something peculiar: certain amendments being proposed went far beyond mere alignment. In March 2022, the government introduced Constitutional Amendment Bill No. 2 of 2022. The bill proposed changes to Articles 52, 79, and 266 of the Constitution, provisions dealing with the separation of powers, presidential term limits, and the dissolution of parliament. While government spokespersons insisted these were merely clarifications, legal experts raised concerns that the amendments could potentially concentrate executive power in unprecedented ways. By September 2023, things escalated. The Electoral Commission of Zambia, now staffed with several UPND-aligned appointees following controversial nominations in late 2022, announced a review of constituency boundaries, a process known as delimitation. This technical exercise, critics alleged, was being designed to redraw electoral maps in ways that would favor ruling party strongholds while fragmenting opposition support bases. Then came the most controversial move. In January 2024, the Ministry of Justice proposed amendments to the Public Order Act and the NGO Act, ostensibly to streamline civic engagement and maintain public safety. Opposition figures immediately cried foul, claiming these amendments were designed to muzzle dissent and restrict the operational space for civil society organizations that had been critical of government policy. The pattern, according to critics, was unmistakable. Piece by piece, provision by provision, the UPND was allegedly using constitutional and legal mechanisms to build an infrastructure of power that would be extremely difficult to dismantle, even if they lost a future election. Direct evidence, quotes and testimony. The most damning testimony came from Fred Membe, president of the Socialist Party, during a press conference in Lusaka on February 15, 2024. His words were measured but devastating. What we are witnessing is not democracy. It's democratic camouflage. The UPND came to power, promising to restore constitutionalism, to strengthen institutions. But what have they done? They have systematically, and I want to emphasize this word, systematically, captured every constitutional body that provides checks and balances. The Electoral Commission? Captured. The Anti-Corruption Commission? Captured. The Judicial Appointments Authority? Under pressure. They don't need to suspend the Constitution like the dictators of old. They've learned to simply rewire it from within. When pressed by journalists about specific evidence, Membe continued. Look at the Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2022. Article 52 used to provide clear limitations on presidential powers during states of emergency. The amendment, which they rushed through Parliament with minimal debate, now gives the president discretionary authority to determine what constitutes a threat to public safety. Do you see what that means? It means any mass protest, any significant opposition gathering, can potentially be classified as a threat, and the president can invoke emergency powers. That's not clarification. That's expansion of authoritarian capability. From the government's side, Minister of Justice Malambo Hambi offered a robust defense during a television interview on February 22, 2024. These allegations are completely unfounded and, frankly, irresponsible. Every single amendment we have proposed has gone through proper parliamentary procedure. We have consulted with civil society. We have held stakeholder meetings. The opposition is simply upset because they lost the election and they cannot accept that the Zambian people have rejected their vision. When we talk about aligning the constitution, we're talking about fixing contradictions that have existed since 2016. The previous government, the PF government, left us with a constitution that contradicts itself in several places. We're simply doing the work that should have been done years ago. When the interviewer asked about the concerns regarding the Electoral Commission appointments, Minister Hambi's response was direct. Show me one country in the world where the party in power doesn't have some influence over appointments. That's how democracy works. We appoint competent people who, yes, may share our vision for the country, but who are also qualified professionals. The opposition appointed their people when they were in power. Now they want to act shocked that we're doing the same thing? It's hypocrisy. But perhaps the most revealing testimony came from an anonymous civil servant within the Ministry of Justice, who spoke to independent journalists under condition of anonymity in March 2024. Look, I've been in government for 15 years, through 3 different administrations. And I can tell you, what's happening now is different. There are strategy meetings, closed-door meetings, where they literally map out how to use constitutional provisions to essentially create legal walls around their power. I sat in one meeting where they discussed how to frame the Public Order Act amendments in human rights language while actually restricting assembly rights. They know exactly what they're doing. It's sophisticated. It's legal. But it's fundamentally anti-democratic. Constitutional lawyer Linda Kasanda, former president of the Law Association of Zambia, added her perspective during a university lecture in April 2024. We need to be very careful about something here. Not every constitutional amendment is a power grab. Constitutions need to evolve. But the concern I have is about the pace, the lack of genuine consultation, and the pattern. When you see amendments to electoral laws, amendments to public order provisions, changes to how constitutional bodies are appointed, and reforms to parliamentary procedure all happening within a 2-year window, you have to ask, is this reform or is this entrenchment? And the answer, honestly, I think is somewhere in the middle, which makes it even more dangerous because it's harder to resist. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. So what are we really looking at here? The question goes beyond partisan politics and strikes at the heart of how modern authoritarianism can emerge, not through tanks and military juntas, but through the slow, methodical capture of democratic institutions using the very laws designed to protect them. Dr. Sishiwa, a political historian at the University of Zambia, frames it this way: African politics has evolved. The crude dictatorships of the 1970s and 80s are largely gone. What we're seeing now is what scholars call constitutional hardball, using legal mechanisms aggressively to gain partisan advantage while staying within the technical bounds of the law. It's happening in Hungary, it's happening in Turkey, and the opposition claims it's now happening in Zambia. The broader implications are staggering. If a government can use constitutional amendments to reshape electoral boundaries, limit opposition organizing, capture oversight bodies, and expand executive authority, all while maintaining elections and a parliament, then what distinguishes democracy from sophisticated autocracy? The Zambian government's defenders, however, argue that the opposition is weaponizing the concept of constitutional manipulation to delegitimize every policy decision they disagree with. Given Shefire, UPND National Youth Chairperson, told supporters at a rally in May 2024. They call us dictators because we're fixing the roads they failed to fix. They call us authoritarian because we're bringing transparency to institutions they looted. Every time we try to reform something broken, they scream power grab. It's a tired playbook, and Zambians see through it. International observers have been watching carefully. The Commonwealth Secretariat issued a carefully worded statement in March 2024 expressing concern about the pace of constitutional reforms and calling for broader stakeholder engagement. The African Union was more circumspect, with its Governance and Democracy Division noting that constitutional amendments are the sovereign right of member states, provided they adhere to continental frameworks on democratic governance. But perhaps the most troubling aspect is what this means for opposition parties. If the claims are true, even partially true, then the UPND has found a way to use the Constitution itself as a barrier to entry. Opposition parties would need not just to win elections, but to win by such overwhelming margins that they could immediately begin undoing constitutional provisions that favor the ruling party. And that's a nearly impossible threshold to meet. There's also the question of precedent. If this strategy succeeds in Zambia, what's to stop ruling parties in Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, or Zimbabwe from adopting similar playbooks? Constitutional engineering could become the new normal for African governance, democracy in form, authoritarianism in function. And yet, ambiguity remains. Are these genuine reforms being unfairly characterized as power grabs? Is the opposition manufacturing a crisis to explain their political irrelevance? Or is something more sinister unfolding beneath the surface of Zambian democracy? The truth likely lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle, a government using its democratic mandate to reshape constitutional architecture in ways that benefit its long-term survival, while genuinely believing they're fixing a broken system. The road to authoritarianism, after all, is rarely paved with obviously malicious intentions. The question we're left with is this: at what point does constitutional reform become constitutional capture? And who gets to decide? Thank you so much for watching today's edition of InspirAfrica Official. This story is far from over, and we'll continue monitoring developments as Zambia navigates these turbulent political waters. I want to hear from you, especially our viewers in Zambia and across southern Africa. What do you make of these claims? Is this legitimate reform or constitutional manipulation? Are we witnessing the evolution of African authoritarianism, or is this simply politics as usual? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation about what democracy looks like in 2024 and beyond. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories that matter, more analysis that cuts through the noise. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop questioning. I'm Nakash, and this is InspirAfrica Official.